the 28th of January. This is Rabbi Furst, Parsha Hashavua Mishpatim.
Good morning, Lou. Good morning, Yechiel.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Good morning to both of you. I say good morning.
Good morning, both of you. Rabbi Furst is on his way.
All right, here he is.
Shalom. Good morning, Roy. Good morning. Good morning, Yechiel. Good to see you back in action, Yechiel. Shavua Shalema, Metz Hashem.
Good morning, Rabbi Furst.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, very good. We'll start in a moment. Lou, I want to talk to you. I got a call last night. I think you were on the phone with Aaron. I think he had some suggestions to make in terms of the I don't know. We got disconnected. We didn't get back together. I wasn't sure exactly what he was suggesting. But
he complained to me that there's too many different links to have to connect to. Because I host you, and then Rabbi Levitt hosts himself, and
right.
then I host Rabbi Moore, and then Rabbi Furman hosts himself.
Right.
So I told him that for the shiurim that I attend, I'm available to host all of them if it's okay with the other people. But I said we'd have to check with the other rabbis to see, if they're willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I suggested that he talk to Rabbi Furman about it.
Right.
I don't know why he called you, because I'm already hosting you, so that's
Okay.
That's already handled. But maybe he just felt comfortable talking to you.
Okay, fine. Then I'll try and get back to him and speak with him about it more. But yeah, you should. If there would be some way to consolidate all the media. Well, sometimes there are different shiurim go on at different times, I think, right?
Yeah, well, that is a fact. The ones that I don't attend, Rabbi London and Rabbi Katzman, I don't attend, and I don't attend all of Rabbi Fairman's shiurim either. So I can't host it if I don't attend.
Right. Okay. Let's see what we can do. All right. In any event, I guess we'll start our learning now. Let's begin with by Chamishi in this week's Parsha's Mishpatim. That would be in Perek Chaf Gimel. In Perek Chaf Gimel, Pasuk Tes, the 9th verse in chapter 23.
Okay, I see it.
Okay. Everyone has it there. Roy, you have it. You feel you have it there?
I'm getting it there. Dollar, Ches, dollar. Dollar is no good. Ches, Tes. Where's Tes? Oh, here's Tes. Okay. Right. Thank you. I've got it now.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Who would like to read? Any volunteers?
Yeah, I'll read.
Okay, please.
V'ger lo sil chatz ve'atem yedatem es nefesh hager ki gerim hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim. So the convert you shall not oppress, and you know the soul of the convert, because You were converts in Egypt.
So is it ger a convert or a stranger? In this one here, it's stranger.
Yeah, well, it refers to a person who's a stranger, but he's converted, right?
Mhm.
That it's more literally translated exactly as a stranger, but it usually in most cases refers to a ger, um,
So convert.
a convert exactly.
Okay.
Uh,
All right.
now,
What's a ger toshav?
well, so a ger toshav is someone who hasn't made a full conversion. He's accepted on himself basically not to be oived of Avodah Zarah, and basically in many cases most of the 7 mitzvahs b'nai Noah, and but he eats nevelis and shreifas. He can eat non-kosher food. He's not converted, right? But he's somewhat associated with us in the philosophical outlooks, and yeah, they have special considerations because of that. So that's considered a ger tosha.
So would that be included in this general statement of ger, you think?
Probably not. Probably not. Um, the the question is what. Let me ask you what if any questions do you have about this command? This is a command, a clear direct command in the Torah.
Mhm.
Well, it seems that it's saying that because of our experience in Egypt, we have some kind of empathy with somebody who is in a similar position.
Right. Okay.
So it would seem it's talking about slaves.
What do you mean the soul of a ger? For you know the soul of a stranger, of a ger, because
That's an you're right, Roy. That's an extra expression. So based on that, if you look at the Rashi, look at the Rashi on the pasuk. Rashi, I think, is dealing with your point here, Roy.
all right.
You have the Rashis here.
So it
Yes.
says, you shall not oppress a stranger. In many places, the Torah warns with regard to the stranger, and it says in parentheses, the convert,
Oh, see, right. So that's correct, right?
because his inclination is to evil.
So, so that statement by Rashi is I'm not sure if that's how I would translate that exact lashon, that that he's
The translation I've got here is in numerous passages, that's 36 in number, does the Torah offer a caution about the ill treatment of the stranger because his original character is bad. And then there's a note on the word bad, which is at the back of the Sefer here.
right. So it's
Yeah.
Minei Shesuru Raw. So meaning we first of all, that's an amazing thing. That's an amazing amount of times 36 times we're questioned about the ger. That's a lot of Torah on that subject. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tremendous amount of, and so you have to realize that even though and according to what's meaning the fact that he's shesuroi raw, meaning his inclination is bad, meaning his inclination is bad, meaning as much as a person has made a change in himself, right? It's very difficult for a person to overcome his background, Meaning a ger, don't forget, a ger, aside from not having the advantage of being born Jewish and having the natural spiritual tendencies that Jews have, he also grew up in an environment which was completely, absolutely non-Jewish, right? And even under the best conditions, it it's different than the Jewish outlook, the Jewish behavior, the Jewish mentality, and that's at the very best. At the very worst, it's could be completely contradictory, right? Completely contradictory. So therefore, his Yetzer Hara is very strongly entrenched, right, within him, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
I have a footnote here that basically says what you're saying. It says that he's liable to revert to the behavior he was accustomed to before he converted.
oh, oh, very good, right? So yeah, he's very sensitive, right? Very sensitive, and is very liable, is very risky. He's very risky. So you need to treat him very carefully, that he shouldn't get the feeling that he's made this big sacrifice many times. Gerim, they absolutely have to leave everything behind. They have to leave. Just take an example from Ruth, right? Naomi was urging her, don't come with me, don't come with me. Go back to your homeland, go back to your people. Do not come with me. You're coming to a place where you're not going to have anything, right? And they had to leave everything behind, and they had to give up, and there was no going back, especially in early times, like now in our times, where the permissiveness in many areas is very great. So they don't people and person and people's religious affiliations are very weak to begin with. So it's not looked as anything really so serious in many cases. But in previous times, it was if the for example, in the time of the Romans, if the Romans found out that Antoninus or Nero or any one of their Caesars, any one of their regular citizens, if they knew that they converted to Onkelos, right, the Ger, if any one of the Roman officials discovered that one of their fellow Romans converted to Jewish, to being Jewish, they would be assassinated. They would be killed. There was no acceptance of such a thing like that. The church wouldn't tolerate for anything like that. They would burn these people at the stake. They would kill them without any compunction, right? That they were being heretical in terms of their heritage and previous religion. So they wouldn't put up with that. Now, we're much more. First of all, as I said, religious affiliations are much more weaker than they were, and there's much more permissiveness in general. So people don't look at it as this great change of life, and so therefore, but when a ger would make the decision to become a ger, they had to leave everything behind. They were burning all their bridges. They would never be allowed to be seen, and they didn't want to be seen. They didn't want to be seen by. So that's one reason why they called a ger, because they're a stranger, and they're coming to us, and if we don't receive them, at least here, this mitzvah is not to oppress them, right? You shouldn't oppress them, right? There are other mitzvahs where it says to love the ger, right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a mitzvah of the obvious says the ger. You should love the ger. Where would that be? Let's see. Hold on. Let's see. Maybe I can find it.
You're very good at that.
Well, I have this computer next to me, so I can try and find it. One second.
It occurs to me also that we see the same thing with the Jewish people.
Yeah.
We left Egypt So we're saying, oh, we had those great cucumbers and watermelon.
Right.
And, here you are, with all these miracles and all this that Hashem is doing for us. And we're saying, we missed the watermelon and the cucumbers.
Right.
It's the same thing we're talking about here. The tendency to revert to our former behavior, our slave behavior.
Right. Let's see. Mhm. Um, let's see here. There's a look if you want, if you have in Vayikra in Parshas Kedoshim, okay. There's the mitzvah. There's one of the times it's mentioned that you should love the ger.
What's the chapter and verse, please?
Okay, it's in chapter Yud Tes, chapter 19.
Okay.
And it's verse Pasuk Lamed Daled 34.
34. Tes 34. As the homeborn among you shall be unto you the stranger that sojourneth with you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God.
Right.
Well, that's pretty clear.
Right. And it's also the same reasons given, because we were strangers in we were strangers in Mitzrayim, in Egypt.
Right. And the Rashi on our pasuk says, on the phrase "the soul of the stranger," how hard it is for him when they oppress him.
Right.
So it's talking about oppression.
Right. I mean, our pasuk is talking about not to oppress them, and the other pasuk is referring to loving them. There's also another pasuk. There's another pasuk in Devarim. There's a pasuk in Devarim that Ahavtem Esager. Take a look in Devarim as well.
Where is that?
That's in Perek Yud in the 10th chapter.
Okay.
And it's in the 19th pasuk, 19 Yud Tes. Perek Yud, pasuk Yud Tes.
You shall love the convert, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Well, that's interesting. Es hager, it translates as convert. Ki gerim, it's the same word. It translates it as both convert and stranger.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I don't know if there's any particular word, a special word for a convert. But basically, I mean, that's the point, that the convert is a stranger, meaning he didn't grow up Jewish. He doesn't have a Jewish family, right? He didn't live amongst Jews, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to know any Gerim, but
yes, I have.
I mean, since they're, first of all, they're very special people. I mean, what they're doing is quite unique and special. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbeinu Yonah in his Sefer Shari Tshuva brings down, I believe it's a Chazal, maybe a Medrash, right? That the Kadosh Baruch Hu has a special um, uh, favor for the converts. It brings a mushal, an analogy that you have a flock of sheep. You have a flock of sheep, and they're in the corral, right? You know, usually the sheep are pastured during the day, and at night they come back and they're put into the corral, right? So one morning the owner of the sheep comes out to inspect his flock, and he sees that there's a deer in the corral in the amongst the flock. That the deer jumped over the fence and then joined the flock, right? So he said the owner of the sheep wonders, and he says, you know, this deer had freedom. It could be roaming around on the hills and dales, you know, freedom in the meadows, in the forests, in the thickets, in the woods, and no one would bother it, and no one would care what it does, and no one's there to supervise it, and it's free. It's free. And here, this deer jumped over the fence and joined the sheep in the corral amongst the flock, putting itself in a very constrained situation, a constrained environment, and limited way of life. So likewise, the ger, they were free and happy, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu is very happy with the goyim as long as they keep the Zayin Mitzvahs B'nai Noach and all the other things associated with those. So Hashem's very happy with them. He doesn't expect them to do anything more, right? Then, but here they took the initiative and decided to change their whole way of life, and to change their place of dwelling, to leave their family, to leave all their friends, right? And as I said, they, you know, in earlier times they were scorned, and not only scorned, sometimes they were hunted. They actually hunted them down. You may know, and the Ger Tzedek, the convert that was befriended by the Vilna Gaon. I don't know if you know his story, but he was eventually caught and killed. He was eventually caught and killed, and by the church. And the Vilna Gaon said that if he wants, he can save him. He can save him. He says, no, he doesn't want to be saved. If this is his destiny to die, he's prepared to die, and that's what he did.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Never heard that.
Well, let's see. I wonder if I have. Yeah. I'm not sure if I could. I think I once. Oh, here it is. Yeah.
It's amazing.
The
poor guy.
Yeah, actually here. Oh, this is quite detailed. It's 12 page. I have a 12-page document on the story. If you want, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see it.
Yeah, you should. If you want, you could. I don't know. It's worth reading it, just to give you an insight into what a ger had to go through in earlier times. And this was not so long ago. This was about 300 years ago. I just want to convert it to a PDF to make it easier to send it. Avram ibn Avram, or the Ger Tzedek, he was known and quite highly regarded, and as I said, he was befriended by the Vilna Gaon. He was killed al Kiddush Hashem in 1749. Yeah. Okay. It's something which might be worthwhile if you want. I'm not saying you have to print it out. Like I say, it's 12. Well, if you print on both pages, it's only 6 pages long. But so it's not too long. But it's if you don't know it, it's worthwhile. I'll send it out. I won't take time now, but as soon as the year is over, I'll send it out. Roy, you would like a copy of that too?
I suppose so. Yeah.
Okay.
In English, of course.
Yeah, it's in English. It reads It's well written. I forgot where I took it. I'm not sure where I found it. I'm sorry. I took it. I didn't copy down the source.
Uh,
But it's probably taken from the original, probably written originally in Hebrew in some way or fashion. So it's quite okay. So yeah. So in our case, we have the prohibition not to pressure the ger, the convert. Then you have other instances where the Torah cautions us, commands us to love them. That's very similar to many mitzvahs. You have the negative side of the mitzvah, and you have the positive side of the mitzvah. And as Rashi points out, because why you don't want to put him under the risk of maybe going back to his old ways, because as I said, his background, his family background, his even his spiritual genetic background is completely different, and so he as a whole his as much as a person will want to and try and change himself, change is very difficult. It's not an easy thing to change by any means. A person, if he's put through great, tremendous efforts, Rav Yisrael Salanter was quoted as saying that it's easier to learn through all of Shas, all of the Gemara, and he's talking about learning it with the Rashis and with the Tosfos, and properly learning all of Shas. It's easier to learn all of Shas than to change one midah, to change one bad personality trait. But a person shouldn't give up. A person should, if he knows, everybody has milas and chesronis. Everyone has pluses and minuses. Everybody has virtues and deficits. So a person has to learn to make use of all the things that the Kadosh Baruch blessed him with, whether on the positive side of things or on the negative side of things. Sometimes even the negative side of things a person can use to his advantage. For example, David HaMelech. David HaMelech was said that he was born with the mazel, meaning in a mazel. We'll talk about that in a minute. A mazel dam, meaning he was created. Hashem created with a tendency for shvikas damim, for bloodshed, right? So David HaMelech used that tendency to wage wars against the enemies of the Jewish people, right? And the Gemara says, likewise, a person who is tending, because of his nature, towards bloodshed, should direct that nature towards becoming a shoichet, or becoming a moyel, right? To channel his tendency for bloodshed, he should channel it for in the context of mitzvahs, just like David HaMelech channeled his tendency for bloodshed to destroy the enemies of the Jewish people. Some say, I heard this from Rabbi Tuski, that one of the reasons why David HaMelech was not able to build the Beis HaMikdash, right? Some say the opposite. Some say because since he had his hands had blood on them, his hands weren't supposed to be used to build the Beis HaMikdash, which is a bias, a place of shalom and peace. And so, therefore, his hands, which were used to shed blood, couldn't be used to build the Beis HaMikdash. But the Robotuski explained that it's a different shot. That his hands were so kadosh, meaning because he every time he killed an enemy, he was doing it on such the level of lishma that every time he killed one of our enemies, it was like he was bringing a korban to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, like he was a Kohen Gadol doing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. So his hands were so kadosh that had he built the Beis HaMikdash, it would have been built in a way with such purity of intention that it would never have been able to be destroyed. And so Kadosh didn't want that, so therefher his son, Shlomo HaMelech, had to be the one to build the Beis HaMikdash. So we just used David HaMelech as an example to show that a person can, if he wants, and it's possible to change a character trait, a tendency that a person happens to have. But a ger has it much more difficult because he didn't have that early training, he didn't have that early environment, he didn't have that basic spiritual genetic material that allowed him to more easily adapt and become a true Jewish person in all ways, in his behavior, in his thoughts, and his personality. So therefore, if we oppress the goy, right, if we the ger rather, if we oppress the ger, we risk the chance that he may decide to return to his old ways. So Hashem is very concerned that they shouldn't return to their old ways. Therefore, we have commands not to oppress them, and a special command also to love them as well. Oh. So, but and you see many times it's mentioned, as we saw a few other psukim, it's mentioned in terms of the negative prohibition of oppressing the non-Jew, the ger rather, or loving the ger. In both cases, it's the one of the reasons given is because we were gerim in Mitzrayim ourselves, right? So the question is asked, how does that relate? What's the connection between us being slaves and strangers in Egypt? How does that relate to this mitzvah of either loving the ger or not oppressing the ger?
The way we empathize.
Excuse me, do we emphasize it?
The way we empathize.
Oh, empathize. We can empathize with it. Okay, exactly. But the question now arises, if it's a question of empathy, right? So the question arises, well, we were never there. That's very good about if Hashem's talking to the Dor Yotzi Mitzrayim, if he's talking to the people who came out of Mitzrayim, that's very good. But they can emphasize with that, about being a stranger. But what about us? How do we emphasize with that?
We're strangers wherever we are, except in Eretz Israel.
Oh, so very good. That would be appropriate during the time of Gullus, right? In the time when we're in exile. Gullus.
Oh yeah.
In the time when we're in exile. In the time of we're in exile, so we can appreciate that, right? But in the time when we had the Beis Hamikdash, meaning in the ideal times, right, when we had Eretz Israel, and we were not amongst strangers in strange lands, right? So how would that part of this mitzvah relate to us if we were in Eretz Israel at the time of Klal Yisrael living in its land amongst fellow Jews?
Well, I suppose in a way we're gerim in this world until we get to the next world where we'll belong.
Oh, so that would be very good, but the pasuk is emphasizing the fact that we were gerim in Mitzrayim, right?
All right. Well,
At pasuk Yud and Yud Aleph. Take a look at what are the psukim that follow this mitzvah of not to oppress the ger?
mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, where are you now? I dropped my internet.
You're back in Mishpatim, right?
Yes.
In pasuk Yud. That's the next pasuk after the pasuk we started with.
About sowing your crop for 6 years?
Right. So read the next two psukim. That would be 10 and 11.
Okay. V'shesh shanim tira es artzecha va'asafta es tivuasa. 6 years, you will sow your land, and you'll bring in its crop. V'hashvi'is tish mitena unetashta v'achlu evonei imecha v'yis ram tochal chayas hasadeh kain ta'aseh lechar mecha lezerecha lezesecha. And in the 7th, you shall let it go, leave it alone, and it will be eaten by the poor of your people, and the rest will be eaten by the animals of the field. So shall you do with your vineyard and your olives.
Oh, right, very good.
So this would seem to have nothing to do with the ger.
Oh, so apparently not. However, there are those that explain the juxtaposition, the what we call the smichas, the connection between the warning not to oppress the ger and the mitzvah of Shemitah. They make a bridge between the two verses, because since they have the question that it's very good, right, for those people who came out of Mitzrayim to associate themselves with the stranger psychology that the ger has, because they themselves are also strangers in Mitzrayim, right? But because of the fact, the question we asked previously, there are many generations where that's not going to be the case, especially if the Jewish people are in Eretz Yisrael and they're in control of their own destiny, so to speak, in the land of Israel. So how do they relate to the fact that they have to be careful about oppressing the ger, because we understand how it is to be a ger? These people who are living in Eretz Yisrael don't understand how it is to be a ger. So how can they, why should the Torah connect and obligate them to be sensitive to the needs of the ger in ways that only a person who himself was in that situation could really feel for and appreciate? So the answer is Shemitah. Even though you may be in Eretz Yisrael, even though you may have your own homestead, you may have your own fields and your own orchards, and you might have everything there for you, but when Shemitah comes along, so and to a certain extent, you are now being evicted from your homestead, from your home. You're not in charge of your home as you normally were. So to a certain extent, Shemitah is like going into Gullus to a certain extent, right? That most people, even though they do have and retain ownership of their land and agricultural properties during Shemitah, but nevertheless, the actual usage of those properties is limited during the year of Shemitah. So in order to help those people who are removed from the situation and the consequent psychology of being a stranger in a strange place, the Torah gives us this mitzvah of Shemitah that we can somehow relate to not having complete ownership over our own, even our own properties. And through not having complete ownership even over our own properties, we have the mitzvah of Shemitah to illustrate that. And that also helps us, therefore, to feel more to the situation of the ger, who he himself has no place in Eretz Israel, right? He has no claim to any place in Eretz Israel. So likewise on Shemitah, we also lose our claim. We lose our individual claims to having any particular place in Eretz Israel. So that's why this pasuk of Shemitah is joined to the pasuk of not oppressing the convert.
Very interesting.
That would answer the question about those who are in Eretz Israel. They're not in Gullus. True, like Rui said, when we're in Gullus, we can understand what it's like to be in a strange place among strange people. But when we're living in Eretz Israel with the Beis Hamikdash and everything is fine the way it's supposed to be, how do we relate to being a ger? So that's specifically when Shemitah is commanded, meaning this year is a Shemitah year, but it's only Shemitah Midrabanan. We don't have a din, a halacha status of fulfilling Shemitah Midoraisa. Shemitah Midoraisa is only if we have majority of the Jews living in Eretz Israel, and could be also be contingent upon having the Beis Hamikdash. So we don't have those things in our time. So therefore, our Shemitah is only a Shemitah which is the Rabbanan, right? A rabbinical command to keep Shemitah. It's not a Doraisa command, a Torah command to keep Shemitah. So that's specifically when we have to have Shemitah, Midoraisa, when we're in that situation, which will help us to have a sensitivity to the ger, because we will at least every 7 years have some type of a common point of reference to the ger, as he's no longer with us, in terms of he's no longer with his original people or his original surrounding. So that allows us, Shemitah allows us to be sensitive to the ger. Cool. Okay.
That's very interesting. I actually feel a little tiny bit of that because I have a small garden,
right?
And you know, I look at it. I see the weeds growing, and you know, the flowers are not nearly as robust as they were, and I feel kind of helpless. That, you know, I'm not in charge. I'm not able to keep it nice.
Right. Right. So that just gives you a little insight into this is what we say, that the Shemitah affects the person's bilis. What's bilis? Bilis is his ownership. Meaning Kadosh Baruch Hu, one of the reasons that's given for the mitzvah of Shemitah is that Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to feel too comfortable in this world. You have to realize that really in this world, nothing really belongs to us, right? There's a in terms of this story is said, you've probably heard it in relation to Shemitah, that there were two people, they were arguing over a piece of land, right? Yeah, for example, you had two farmers, right? You have two farmers, and they argue about there in the northeast field, right? They're arguing. This one claims that the road belongs to him; it's on his property. Another one says the road belongs to him; it's on his property. And they're fighting over it. They say it's mine, it's mine. He says it's yours. So they come to the Rav. And it says, "Look, we're fighting over this road. It's my road, and it was my grandfather's road, and my great-great-grandfather's road. It's my road, and that's it." The other one says the same thing. So the Rav says, "Well, let's go out and take a look at the road. Let's take a look at the road." So they go out to the field and start walking down the road. And he says, "Okay, you tell me what part is it?" He says, "Yeah, this is this fence and this rock, and this is where the road turns, and that turn, that's on my property." Another one says, no, that turn is on my property. So he listens to them. Then the Rav gets down on his hands and knees and puts his ear to the ground. So they both ask the Rav, "What are you doing? You're getting on your hands and knees and putting your ear to the ground." So he says, "I want to hear what the ground says. I want to hear what the road says." And the road's saying, you know what he's saying? He says, both of these guys, they think that I belong to them. No, they belong to me. They're both coming to me. That we think that we own the ground, but it's really the opposite, that we're all destined to go into the ground, that the ground really owns us. That we have to realize on Shemitah that we really don't, even if we do happen to own things, and it was very evident and known and understood when Klal Yisrael was living in Eretz Yisrael, and each person had their own homestead. It was their ancestral property, right? It owned. It was the when they gave and when Moshe Rabbeinu left Klal Yisrael and Yeshua took Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. So there was the Chalukas Haaretz. There was the division of the land, and each tribe got its own territory. Each family within each tribe got its own territory, right? And each person had his own particular absolute piece of land, a piece of property. And that would be, a person would have a very strong tendency to think and believe that it's actually his forever and ever and ever. But that's ridiculous because people are not in this world forever, ever, and ever. So therefore, to help us realize this is the mitzvah Shemitah, that we have to realize even while we're here in this world, we still don't have complete absolute control over even the land that we so dearly and definitively think is ours. That's part of one of the reasons given to the mitzvah of Shemitah, that we give up what we call our bilis. We have to give up our control, our property ownership during the year of Shemitah to help us realize that we really don't own it. It's simply that we're passing through this world, and Hashem, if He dispose upon us these properties, it's for Kadosh Baruch Hu's good old reasons, and but they don't really belong to us, and there's nothing really to fight about. Therefore, if there's a dispute about land, because ultimately it doesn't belong to the person at all. He's ultimately going to be subject to the decrees of Kadosh Baruch Hu, and by observing Shemitah, a person is taking that on himself. He's appreciating that in and on his own. Okay.
Well, I was looking at Parsha Vayera, the beginning there about Abraham and the three men who approached him. I was wondering if they were using the word stranger or what word was being used there. But also I realised that it's teaching us the lesson that we're learning here too with you about treating them properly.
Meaning the way Avraham Avinu received them.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. You see, even Lot, even when the two came to Lot in Sodom, even Lot greeted them properly and gave them honor and respect. That was what Lot learned by Avraham Avinu. That was the great invention of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, among the many things he invented the concept of Haknasas Orachim, of welcoming guests. Guests were not usually people. It's hard for us to envision, to relate to it, but guests in general were not welcomed by people. Strangers were not normally welcomed by people. That it was very difficult being stranger. You could amongst the Jewish people, since in fact we're all one group of people, right? So it's less pronounced. But you can just imagine that if an Italian would go to Ireland, right? What's an Italian doing in Ireland? Not much in common with the Irishman, right? What does an Italian have?
Actually, he's got the same religion, I think. Aren't they Catholics?
Maybe, could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
But anyway.
I don't think the Irishman eats spaghetti. But at least they didn't before they came to until they came to America. But So it was that's also we understand the depth of the Nisoyan, the test that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was testing Avraham Avinu with the test of Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha, to leave his homeland, the place of his birth, right, the place of his father's residence. That was not an easy thing to do in those days. Strangers were immediately suspect, right? What are you doing here? Meaning the first thing when you see is a stranger, you think, well, why is this guy not living where he's supposed to live, right? That's the first thing you think about when you see a stranger. This guy's he's a fish out of water. Why is this fish out of water? He must be a renegade, must be a criminal or something like that. So he's immediately suspect.
Has anybody written a sefer on the Jewish attitude to strangers and on being strangers? No.
Not that I know of. I mean, it could be. There are a lot of Sfarim have been written. I'm not sure.
Interesting one to author.
Yeah, it's true. You have to. First step is you have to do a lot of research. You have to do a lot of learning.
Well, there you go, Rabbi Furst.
Your next book.
Yeah.
Could be. Never know. You never know. Okay, I guess it's about time to. We got about a minute left, so everyone should have a good, warm and dry Shabbos. Mitzvah Shem.
Amen.
And we'll see everyone in the beginning of the week next week. Mitzvah Shem.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you,
Shabbat
Rabbi.
shalom. Shabbat shalom, Yechiel. And to
Okay. Thank you, Yechiel. Be well. Thank you, Luz. Thank you, Roy. We'll be well. Shalom. Bye.